What's going on, guys? It's the Unhinged Engineer here. In addition to my professional development content, I have made a lot of stuff about aerospace engineering because, in case you can't tell, I am an aerospace engineer myself. And since you guys seem to be really interested in this kind of content, I wanted to make just a list of 5 things I really love about aerospace engineering. So this will probably be one of the less pragmatic videos that I've made. This isn't really about like how to succeed in aerospace engineering or what you need to know. I really just wanted to kind of gush over how fun the role is, how fun the industry is, and give you a couple of positive data points that if you're interested in aerospace engineering, you should definitely know about. I actually plan to make a more negative video, 5 things I hate about aerospace engineering at a later date. Obviously, I do love my job and I love my field, but there are gripes I have with it as I would with anything else. And so I figure those are also worth you knowing about. So yeah, if you're interested in this kind of content, definitely like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, let's talk about 5 things I really enjoy about being an aerospace engineer. First one I'm going to talk about here is the hardest problems. So this is a little bit of the aerospace supremacy stereotype that you may have heard of before, but I really do believe, just from my experience and also what I've seen aerospace engineers accomplish, that aerospace engineering has a high likelihood, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, has a high likelihood of pushing engineers to work as hard as possible on the most difficult problems that engineers could be tackling today. There's a saying, it's pretty straightforward: space is hard. I'm specifically talking about space because that's where the majority of my experience lies, but you could also apply this to other fields of aerospace like aviation, UAVs, maritime systems, stuff like that. Space is hard is basically about how tight the margins are and how tight the trades are between different systems on a rocket or any other aerospace vehicle. You typically don't get anything for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch here. All your margins are tight, all your requirements are strict, and the systems you're building are incredibly complicated, right? Rockets are not simple. Everything from the engine all the way up to the fairings to the navigation systems and code on board. Just about everything in aerospace engineering is incredibly complex, and that complexity, when combined with the actual difficulty of standards to which these systems have to perform, makes it a really challenging field that I find incredibly rewarding. Beyond that, there's a ton of firsts going on in aerospace engineering. I'll talk about this in a later point in this video, but there's tons of new things going on in aerospace and just problems that really have never been solved before. Over the course of my lifetime and early career, I've seen SpaceX engineer self-landing rockets, which was probably thought to be impossible back in the Apollo days. We recently just returned to the moon with the Artemis 2 mission. We're working on bringing supersonic flight back, which in a commercial setting hasn't really been around since the Concorde. There's lots of firsts going on, problems that have never been solved for, that you can't look up the answer for in a textbook, that if you really want to be working at the bleeding edge of, honestly, technology, there's a lot of opportunity for you to do so in aerospace. Aerospace engineering really does demand the most of its engineers, and you'll get lots of really strong skills, right? Whether it's thinking about things in terms of first principles or using systems thinking, being really creative in your problem solving, and on the less creative front, being super rigorous about validating that the work you've done is of quality and is up to spec for whatever you're trying to accomplish. Aerospace engineering is really going to demand the most from their engineers, and as a result, I feel like I've become a pretty capable one pretty quickly in my career. I'll let the people I've worked with be the judge of that, but I like to think aerospace engineering has taught me a lot. If you want to solve really difficult problems, if you want to work on really hard stuff, aerospace engineering has plenty of opportunities for you to do that. Like I said, aerospace is not a monolith. There are probably really straightforward, kind of boring rote roles in aerospace doing the same thing over and over again, but I do think that in terms of percentage of roles or companies or systems that are in extreme flux as the industry changes, aerospace engineering is really tough to beat in that regard. So speaking of the aerospace industry, it is really booming. So the aerospace field is typically pretty cyclical. You can imagine during the space race and the Cold War, that was a boom. And then kind of 90s, early 2000, there was a bit of a bust where, the American defense complex was focused more on the war on terror versus actual large scale space capabilities, right? Now we're entering into this era where access to space is much more abundant and economically feasible. This recent boom is kind of started mainly from SpaceX, but also aside from space, there's lots of innovations in autonomy that are allowing us to do things with drones that would have previously had to be done with planes or helicopters or other things like that. So there's an autonomy boom going on, there's a space exploration boom going on, There's lots of different booms going on in aerospace as a whole, which again is not a monolith. I have the compound annual growth rates for a few different sectors with citations at the bottom listed out here, but you can get a rough idea. Space launch services are growing really, really quickly. Like, people are trying to put more stuff in space. There's more need for satellites, either for internet connectivity or Earth observation, both on a commercial and a defense/national security basis. Speaking of that, there's tons of autonomous logistics and defense, and even more novel things like VTOL. Like, hopefully in the 2028 LA Olympics, we're going to be able to fly around in VTOL aircraft to get from, shooting to Olympic wrestling, whatever else you're trying to see. There's lots of really interesting fields, either A, being revolutionized, or B, coming into being in the first place, all happening right now, which gives you a ton of opportunity to stake your claim in this growing field. We are very much in a bull cycle right now. It's interesting too, I like to refer to this as a land grab. Like, you could imagine there's a ton of opportunity for people to do that as new fields or new techniques or practices come about in the aerospace industry. We're not in this era where things are stagnant and we're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're seeing a ton of firsts, as I alluded to in the previous slide, and thus there's a ton of opportunities for you to really punch above your weight class in terms of cool work that you can do and cool stuff you can learn. I'm very bullish on the aerospace industry and therefore bullish on the experiences anybody within it will have. So I actually talked about this previously and borrowed these first couple bullets from a previous video I made, but aerospace is a very, very generalist role. I think it has a stereotype of being extremely specialized because it's focused on one industry. But the reality is, when you're focused on an industry instead of a knowledge base per se, you actually have to look at all different fields that encompass systems operating effectively in that industry. So propulsion, structural engineering, aerodynamics, avionics, GNC, communications. There's tons of different subsystems that go into a performant aerospace system that an aerospace engineer really has to know a little bit about, just about all of them, in order to actually understand how the vehicle is going to behave or whether the vehicle is going to satisfy requirements, which is at the end of the day our job for the most part. So aerospace engineering is a very generalist role, and if you're like me and have a short attention span, it's great for you because there'll be tons of opportunities to kind of jump around between different roles and get exposed to different things. You definitely will want to specialize over time. Like people do typically find their corner of the aerospace universe that they enjoy and that they're proficient in. But even once you specialize, you get this opportunity to work on multidisciplinary problems with multidisciplinary teams, which will teach you just a ton of stuff. And even if you do find yourself in one niche but want to switch, there are, especially in growing industries, growing companies, lots of opportunities to kind of hip hop around and see what you're interested in and maybe get a fresh start if something gets a little stale. So aerospace engineering is a super, super general field, and you can get exposed to a lot of different things if it's something you decide to pursue. Next point I want to talk about is probably an opinion piece, but I am a huge math nerd. Like, I don't really even like science. Like, I didn't enjoy chemistry. I didn't enjoy earth science or biology or anything like that. All I ever wanted to do was crunch numbers all day. And as far as engineering majors go, obviously engineering majors require math. But in my experience, in my opinion, which is definitely biased, aerospace is one of the heaviest in math that's out there. Aerospace does tend to stress these hardcore math concepts just as much as other majors, if not more so, even as you get out of school, depending on the field or the roles you take. Like I said, aerospace isn't a monolith, so this one can fluctuate a lot, but I've found that I'm preserving my math and analytical skills well out of school, which is really important because those can be a use it or lose it thing. And I know that because there are some skills I haven't kept up to date since I got out of college that I'm trying to get back into. You can definitely feel the rust shaking off as I learn it. But math is one of those things that if you lose your ability to really break down problems critically, formulate systems, simulations, equations, whatever, from that problem, and then actually use those tools to analyze or execute, that skill, aerospace engineering, really, really keeps it sharp where other fields do not. So I'm really grateful for that because I think they are useful skills, not just in my work, but also in my life. As I've talked about a million times, there's a ton of different examples of the types of math used in aerospace engineering. I just have a few listed here. One thing I will say is that this is especially true in coding heavy roles, whether it's flight software, GNC, modeling and simulation. Roles that have you writing a lot of code will typically require you to understand the math that we're trying to perform, the computations we're trying to perform with the code we're writing. So even if you're just doing front end in aerospace, chances are it's a front end thing for a system with very complex math in the back end, whether that's telemetry reading or simulation running or data analysis. Like, there's a lot of math in aerospace engineering to get the point across. And I think that coding roles especially, but most roles in aerospace engineering, are going to force you to preserve your math skills out of school, which I think is valuable. Last one I want to talk about, which is probably the most subjective part of this video, is how meaningful the work is. So I talked in the beginning about aerospace encompassing some of the most difficult problems in the world, but I believe it also encompasses a lot of the most meaningful problems in the world. That's anything from colonizing other planets or exploring deep space and learning about the foundations of our universe, to providing internet connectivity and other communications around the world, even to its most remote, least technologically supported regions, from moving people around the world and goods around the world, interconnecting different countries and cultures. And the last point here is national security, of course, like protecting our nation, protecting their allies. These are lots of very, very important, impactful problems in the world that aerospace gives you the opportunity to reach out and touch in some way. So I really do think that aerospace is incredibly meaningful and impactful to the world. I hate to dump on other forms of engineering, but I have heard lots of people talk about working in other fields like big tech and spending months just quote unquote making a button. You're not just making a button in aerospace engineering. You're building real physical systems that are going to really manifest themselves in the real world. So you get a lot of meaning out of that. And even if in aerospace engineering you are just building a button, chances are that button is part of a very complex system that is doing something very meaningful, as I alluded to in the beginning of this slide. So that's why I find aerospace meaningful. I did want to throw it in here. There's also definitely a certain element of panache to aerospace engineering. There's a certain cool factor. It's fun to talk about at cocktail parties. I did know a good amount of people towards the beginning of college that was all they were interested in. They were just like high achievers and picked aerospace because it sounded smart and it sounded cool and it was impressive to people. Those typically don't last long, so I don't think that's a good reason to do aerospace engineering in its own right, but it definitely is the cherry on top of this otherwise incredibly meaningful, incredibly deep and impactful field. The fact that you get to brag about it is fun too. So yeah. In conclusion, what are the 5 things I love about aerospace engineering? And I should say, this list is not all inclusive. There are lots of other things I love about aerospace engineering, but these are just a few that came to mind that I think would be of interest. For one, aerospace engineering requires you to tackle the toughest problems. Margins are tight, performance standards are high, and really demands the best of their engineers, which will teach you a lot. Aerospace engineering is an incredibly booming industry along several different verticals. There's lots of opportunities to do different things, to try and explore different things, and these fields and companies and products are growing in real time. So even though aerospace has a lot of rich history, there are lots of things happening now that have never happened before. And so you can go out and stake your claim to some part of that scope. Next one, aerospace is an incredibly generalist role that if you want to hop between different subject areas and learn a little bit about a lot of things, aerospace engineering definitely gives you the opportunity to do that, even as you eventually start to specialize throughout your career. Aerospace engineering is very math heavy, so if you're really invested in preserving your math and analytical skills well out of school, there are tons of opportunities for you to do that in aerospace engineering, which is good because you can really preserve those and carry them with you, not just in your career, but throughout your entire life. And lastly, I find aerospace engineering incredibly meaningful. I think the problems aerospace engineers are solving do impact the world in a significant way. And if you want to make your mark throughout your career, not just make a button, not just do something that people will forget about with a couple of pull requests, if you want to do something that really, really matters, I think aerospace engineering will let you do that. These are just a few of the things I really enjoy about aerospace engineering, and I think that if it's a field you're interested in, it's worth you knowing about. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was definitely more of a subjective, kind of fluffy one as compared to some of the other ones I make. I primarily make videos giving you actual, actionable advice on how to succeed in engineering fields, aerospace engineering being one of them, but I do think there are lots of people who are kind of interested in the industry or know it's booming right now and might be thinking about if a pivot into it is the right move. And I, for many reasons aside from the 5 listed here, definitely believe aerospace is great and you should check it out. Like I said, I'm the Unhinged Engineer. I make professional development content for other young engineers like myself, not 20 years after I've gone through it, but as I'm going through it in real time. And so if that's something you're interested in, this is definitely the channel for you. like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for my 5 things I hate about aerospace engineering video. It's taking me longer to make because the truth is I do love my field and I do love my job. So I'm kind of reaching for things I don't like about it. But hopefully that will also be insightful. A couple things to look out for. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time.